So what he was speaking most recently here in this last chapter on Yirat Shamayim is the fact that a human being has three souls, a nefesh, a ruach, and a neshama. And he was saying that the nefesh is that part of our soul which is connected to the blood of the body, which is focused in the liver, and that is responsible for most of our visceral desires, whereas the ruach is situated in one's heart, and that has to do with the types of emotions and even haughtiness or arrogance that a person would have. And he says that these two levels of soul, these two lower levels of soul in the places that they correspond to the body, physical and emotion, can serve as a stumbling blocks for us if we don't know how to channel these energies properly. And that's where the role of the higher of the three levels of soul comes in. That's the neshama. The neshama located in the brain, and it's the source for intellect. And it's the enlightened soul which directs us on the right path. And he says that if a person has the soul, the neshama, govern the ruach and the nefesh, then a person will be able to have the right intentions in terms of learning Torah and serving Hashem and so forth and so on. But if a person gives precedence to the lower two levels of soul, then that could lead him to indulgence, either in material pleasures or in emotional types of pleasures, and that should be avoided. And this is what he said: a person has two masters, and he should subjugate himself to the upper spiritual neshama master and not the lower physical nefesh and ruach master. Okay? And I believe that brings us up to Reish Mem Ches, the paragraph starting with the word Gam, because what we ended up with was that little discourse that I was suggesting about the kaved and the lev and the moach, kalem, as opposed to moach, lev and kaved, which was melech, and I think that's what we concluded with. Gam the behema yesh nefesh v'ruach. Animals also have a nefesh and a ruach. Very interesting. Ki habema mis'ava v'koeses k'mo adam. Because an animal has desires associated with the nefesh, v'koeses, and is angry. Anger, an emotion corresponding to the ruach, k'mo adam, like a person. Most sources that I've seen do not give animals a nefesh. A ruach. Just a nefesh. But here he says they have a nefesh and a ruach. Derech Hashem, for example, and I believe also Nishmas Chaim. Nefesh Chaim. There's also Sefer Nishmas Chaim, which was written by an early Kabbalist. Other works that what? They say yes. Nefesh. No, only nefesh. Nefesh. Ruach is an emotion that animals don't have, and the anything that we would associate with animals showing emotion is really an expression of instinct, but not emotion. But here he says explicitly that animals have both a nefesh associated with their physical plane and their desires, physical urges, and also ruach, their anger, an emotion. Como Adam. Aval Adam yesh lo neshama yesera hamedaberes v'hamakeres ben emes l'sheker. But human beings have an elevated level of soul, this neshama, above the other two, which gives them the ability to speak and to distinguish between truth and falsehood. This is very interesting, because most other sources that I've seen associate the ability of speech to ruach and not neshama. Like it says in the Targum, ruach milalala, that God made man a speaking spirit. The commentaries note that the word ruach is used there. Ruach memamala, a speaking spirit, implying that physical functions are associated with the nefesh. The nefesh. Ruach is associated with emotions and our ability to speak. And neshama is intellect. But he says no, animals have nefesh and ruach. What separates humans from animals is the neshama, and that's associated with our ability, our power of speech, which the animals don't have. They might be able to communicate, but not through language. It's through sounds. Ukeshayamus aguf, az tamus nefesh hata'ava v'nefesh haruach. But when the body dies, then there will also die the desiring nefesh and the ruach nefesh. V'nisheres tzuras neshama helyoina hachama. And what will be left is the higher upper soul. Sheina mesa v'misas aguf, which does not die with the death of the body. It's also very interesting, again, because it's my understanding from most of the sources that I've seen, that regarding human beings, when the person dies, the neshama continues to exist. The ruach also continues to exist. It's explicit in the Nefesh Chaim and other sources. And even the ruach, even the nefesh continues to exist.
In the kever, no?
Huh? Part of it stays in the kever, but part of it goes up and remains connected with the neshama and the ruach. Only this a certain degree of nefesh remains in the kever, and that's why we call, for example, the headstone or the tombstone is referred to as a nefesh, because the name of the person is there, and the lowest degree of nefesh remains connected to the makom hakvura, and it's from that place that the body will be resurrected. Through that level of soul, the other souls will be connected to the body at the time of resurrection. Very interesting. The nefesh of animals, it's what he says here is said regarding the nefesh of animals, that when the animals die, the nefesh dissipates and it doesn't have its own separate independent existence. It seems like it kind of it's retained within the world, and it goes into the living spirit of another animal, or part of the living animate energy in the world. But the human soul, the nefesh, the ruach, and even the neshama, the ruach, and even the nefesh is elevated. But it says no. She'ena mesa mimis aguf. It says v'haruach tashuv el Elokim asher nassano. The pasuk would seem to be disprove what he's saying, because it says the ruach returns to God, who gave it, implying that the ruach remains. But he explains, Hi ruach hachochma. It's referring to the spirit of wisdom, which is the neshama. Ukeshadam chotei, when a person transgresses, mesa nishmas nafshoi, v'nishmas ruchoi. When a person sins, he causes a termination of his nishmas nefesh and his nishmas ruach. What is this talking about? Perhaps the influence of the neshama in the nefesh, in the ruach. He causes that to be terminated. The Nefesh Chaim discusses this as well, that when a person transgresses, he causes the levels of ruach to become disassociated with nefesh. And that can result in a type of kares. When it says, V'nichrusa nefesh ahi me'ameha, that the nefesh will be cut off. He explains it's a severing of the nefesh from the ruach and the neshama. But he says that tshuva can restore that through reconnecting the nefesh to the ruach. But in any case, he brings a verse here for the idea. Hanefesh hachoites hi tamus. The sinning soul will die. Again, he explains this. It takes it out of the literal meaning of the verse, and from the context, he seems to be saying not will the nefesh die, but the neshama of the nefesh will die. V'amar Moshe Rabbeinu olav hashalom ish Elokim, and Moshe, the man of God, said, "V'havadati es hanefesh shehi mikerav hama." I will cause there to be lost that sinning soul from within its people, from the midst of its people. Shema mineh, we hear from this, Korei nefesh, oisa shehi mesa. The nefesh is that one which dies. Or you see from here that the nefesh can die. He's going back to the original point where he said when a person dies, the nefesh and the ruach die, but the neshama continues. Here it's trying to bring a source for the idea. The nefesh dies. Why? V'avarati as a nefesh ahi mikerav ama. It's very interesting, this whole piece. I mean, it's quite different than like I said, what I've understood from several other sources. Because this verse is not necessarily proof that the soul dies. It's saying that the soul is lost. But that doesn't mean it's terminated. V'havarati as a nefesh ahi mikerav ama. I will cause this soul to be lost among the midst of its people, so that the soul will be estranged. But where do you necessarily see from this verse that it'll be terminated? It'll cease to exist. That doesn't seem to be the pashut pshat. Uliachar mosa rasha, after the death of the wicked, hanashama ha'chochma yika'aleinu b'chafa kela. After a person dies, the neshama ha'chochma, not the nefesh and the ruach, but the neshama, yika'aleinu b'chafa kela, will be stuck in limbo, a form of spiritual existence which is called kafa kela. Daniel, have you heard this term before, the kafa kela? But your Hebrew is pretty good, right? You can read? You can follow the reading that you're reading? Yeah? Kafa kela is like a slingshot. But it's referring to the soul is kind of slung back and forth in spiritual limbo, because this wicked person was, very far from the proper path during life, so that soul is kind of flung out and separated from the regular repository of souls of the righteous after death. It's not really a punishment to punish the soul, as much as it's a consequence, a way of stirring up some regret within the soul for having dislocated itself from the normal path of righteous people, and now it's dislocated in the spiritual realm. The purpose would hopefully be at some point, in some way, to bring that soul back home.
It's not eternal.
It's not necessarily eternal. It could be. It could be. A person who's constantly vacillating. One day is a tzaddik, one day is a rasha. One day is a tzaddik, one day is a rasha. One day does good, one day does bad. It's not a good precedent to set. A person doesn't want to live his life in this world in a state of spiritual limbo. The consequences, it sets a trajectory. But here he's talking about a rasha anyway. Why does this happen? Because the person listened to the ruach and the nefesh, the stumbling blocks of physical and emotional types of indulgences. V'nefesh tzaddik asher hanashama helyoina itchazko al ruach v'nefesh. But the nefesh of a tzaddik, meaning the righteous soul, asher hanashama elyoina itchazka al ruach v'nefesh, which the upper soul, the neshama, strengthened itself. It's being kind of connected to the ruach and the nefesh. Hitzurah tachas kisei kavod. It will be hewn out. Well, it will be, let's say, placed underneath the holy throne. So obviously, I don't know. Maybe I'm not understanding the author's position here so clearly. I'm not sure he's wording it in the most clear way. But I'm hearing here an admission that the nefesh can continue after death, not that it dies. Because he said before, the blanket statement, When a person dies, the nefesh and the ruach are gone. Only the neshama stays. But now he's saying that the nefesh tzaddik, the righteous nefesh, will continue to exist. V'nefesh tzaddik asher neshama elyoina hitchazka al ruach v'nefesh hitzura taras kisei kavod. V'nefesh tzaddik, unless he's referring to this nefesh tzaddik as another term for the neshama. V'nefesh tzaddik asher neshama elyoina hitchazka al ruach v'nefesh hitzura taras kisei kavod. V'aksil sheshama l'ruach v'nefesh. But the fool who took the advice of the ruach and the nefesh, nishmaso hikares tikares. The neshama will be wiped out. Again, others say that no, what receives kares is the nefesh, like it says, a nefesh echi. The nefesh will receive kares, but the neshama is helik elokah mimah. And even the neshama of a rasha has some tikkun in the world to come. It's the nefesh which is severed, but not the neshama. But he says no. The nishmas, the neshama of the fool, his neshama will be cut off. But the person who listened to the higher soul, shenupcha lo mikisei kavod, that was infused within him from the throne of glory, nishmasoi tiske l'rav tuva tzafon. His neshama will receive the great pleasure that is awaiting him. It's very interesting here. I'm glad we didn't skip over this paragraph by mistake. Even though this is a Musar book, it's a little piece of Kabbalah, although the opinion here seems a bit different than many of the other opinions I've seen, as I pointed out. So it would be interesting to learn more about that. But since the author here doesn't emphasize it too much, it only discusses one paragraph, I don't know how much more we can go into that. It's an interesting discussion. In any case, Va'ata hoteos nechave tovin v'teda. Now, tilt your hair, Daniel, and here, you'll understand. She'neshama hi shechuna b'lev. The neshama, that's the higher level of soul, it dwells within one's heart. V'hu moshav hayira. And that is the dwelling place of fear, of awe of God. So again, I mean, can't help but pointing out what seems to be contradictions when he said that the ruach was in the heart, and therefore the seat of negative emotions, whereas the neshama is in the brain, and therefore the thought of the source of intellect. Yeah, but we do find this idea that the neshama is. We find sources that say the neshama is located in the heart, because the heart is the place of bina, and the neshama gives a person bina, comprehension, understanding. And so maybe that's what he means here as well. It means the soul, the neshama is rooted in the brain, and it's a source of our intellect and our enlightenment. But it's also has an effect on the heart, and the heart works together with the brain to be able to comprehend and understand. In order to have intellect and comprehend. Let's see if that fits in here. Kimisham totzaos machshava. He says, because it is in the heart that you have the outflow of one's thoughts. So I think that what I suggested was more or less in the right direction, meaning he is of the opinion that the neshama is rooted in the brain, but it has its influence. But it has an influence in the heart, because the heart is like the place of the outpouring of one's thoughts. One has a thought, and those thoughts are integrated into the plane of action through our heart, what we want, what we desire, what we want to achieve. And if it's coming from the brain, from the neshama, that would be good things. If it's coming from the liver, it could be visceral things. That's what it says. Kimisham toitzoas amachshava, v'amachshava misromemes u'misgadeles b'chadrei lev. The thoughts are amplified and they grow in the chambers of the heart. Kasher yisroimamu galei hayam, just like the surging waves of the sea. Hanashama doreshes v'chokeres u'mizbonenes b'chol ha'ma'asim. The soul investigates, it searches and tries to discern all of the different deeds. Valev mishotet b'chochmaso l'merchok, and the heart can fly with its wisdom to great distances. Vatsofe b'yiraso inyanim rabim, and the heart with fear of God can understand a great many things. Berega koton mechashev hena vehena, in just a moment the heart could think and contemplate many different things. V'ratz v'shav me'inyan li'inyan, and it goes back and forth from one to the other. The thought certainly does that. The thoughts certainly do that, but the heart can also do that as well. And therefore, the heart is like an instrument of the mind. If the thoughts are coming from the mind into the heart will come to want to, let's say, desire, and therefore actually gain and attain, which the mind can't do. The body can only do that, right? So that the thoughts of the mind are infused into the heart. What becomes part of the heart becomes part of one's will and desire, and then that will and desire is translated to the body in order to attain it. And in this way, the neshama, therefore, is also connected to the heart. Ha'adam heichkim v'hiskil oisoi tzur oilamim v'limid osoi chochma v'das. Regarding a human being, therefore, he was instructed and enlightened by the creator of the universe, v'limid osoi, who taught him chochma v'das, who taught him wisdom, intelligence, and knowledge. Ubazos chochma zoicher ha'adam kol ha'oivros v'roeh kol hanoldos. And with this wisdom that was taught to mankind by God, a person remembers everything that transpired, and he sees everything that will transpire. Ubazos chochma oise galgalim. And with this wisdom, he makes like wheels, perhaps, verechaim, or like millstones, litchon, bli omal. Wow. To grind with little influence, with little effort. I think what he's getting at is that a person's heart, what a person thinks and what a person is kind of working on inside, can actually process a huge amount of information, recalling things that were, anticipating things that will be, conceiving of ideas and plans and working them through. I never quite thought about it that way, but he's comparing the heart to like a grinding mill. And it's true. We're constantly grinding through thoughts and through feelings, effortlessly, in the sense that there's really no mechanical moving parts, and you don't need an engine to be moving it, right? It all just happens very subtly and very quietly, very quickly, very efficiently, and very powerfully. But I like the analogy personally very much. Tochen, tochanim, kol hazman, tochanim. Grinding thoughts and experiences and feelings and impressions and attitudes. We don't even realize it. It's happening all the time. You're constantly thinking, even about mundane things, where you're going to do, what you're going to do, where you're going to go, at what time, in what order, what hierarchy, and what's going to happen if this happens or that happens, in your alternate plans, and if he comes or if she comes or he doesn't come.
How do we know if it's the mind or is it the heart? How do we,
I think you can kind of feel it. I think you can kind of feel it. There are times when you're clearly like you're grinding something in your mind, and other times when you're grinding it in your heart. It's like more of an emotion, and sometimes I think and oftentimes it's both.
So basically, when you have emotions, you're basically more working with the heart. So
I think so. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting concept because biologically speaking, I don't think our heart is really biologically having really anything to do with creating emotions. If we feel emotions, it would seem to me from a biological point of view, it might be because our hearts are perhaps responding to emotion, not generating it. In other words, if I'm afraid, I feel it in my heart. If I'm happy, I feel it in my heart. Not that my heart is making me happy or afraid.
Everything starts from the more.
I think so.
So how can you say that we're, you know, you know, it seems like there's two things separate. One, you have the intellect, like you say, you're thinking, and you. Then there's another part that, like, it's on its own, but it has to be connected, somehow with.
Yeah, I'm seeing it somehow connected. Is that you're thinking about something, but you're reacting to what you're thinking about as well.
Yeah.
You're thinking about something, but as you think, your thought is reacting to that thought. But that reaction to the thought is actually experienced by your body and in subtle ways. You're thinking, well, I want to, just say a simple example. I want to go there, but it depends on whether the person meets me there. Wait, why wouldn't you come? So now, in one split second, you've contemplated that the person that you're depending on might be there. So you think, why wouldn't he come? Maybe he'd be delayed. Maybe he's angry at me. Maybe he has some reason to want to make me angry. Maybe the person has loyalty somewhere else. I mean, you'd be thinking instantaneously 5 different possibilities as to why that person won't be there, and right. And you're going to be emotionally reacting in a very subtle way to each one of those possibilities, right? Now you have to start thinking up like an alternate route. Well, what happens if he doesn't come? Then what do I do? So then you're thinking, well, right, should I call him or not call him? It's going to look like I'm running after him, and that would compromise my pride. Or should I not call him and make him pay for not coming? Or I don't know. I'm just you do that.
I mean, like the neshama is sort of like a regulator of emotions, that you have a series of things that will happen to you, which will either annoy you or make you angry or make you happy or make you sad, and the neshama's role is to sort of regulate how you respond to.
I don't know. I agree with all that, except that I don't know if the neshama is responsible for regulating. I think your free will is the regulator for that.
Something is somehow.
Yes, I think.
Okay, like you're feeling this, but the reaction has to be.
Yes, I think.
Otherwise, you just be an emotional being. Go, that annoyed me, and you just get angry or happy, or
yes,
just
or
respond to him.
Yes, yeah, an emotional being or a person whose thoughts are out of control as well. So you could just go wild with thoughts and feelings, which I think we're constantly doing. I agree with him very much. We're constantly grinding. I'm not saying that's necessarily the good thing. It might be bad. Maybe it might not be a good thing, but for myself, I know that I'm constantly grinding thoughts and feelings, constantly, all the time, constantly thinking, well, what am I going to do? In what order? What hierarchy? What happens if that doesn't? This doesn't happen. If this works, that doesn't work. And alternate plan B, C, D, E, and why wouldn't work? And if it doesn't, why? What the person's thinking? All this stuff. It goes like boom, runs through me instantaneously, all of the time. And I think it's a combination of your thoughts and your ability to feel emotions. And I think that the emotions are your body's responses to either internal stimuli, which would be your thoughts, or external stimuli, which would be things that happen to you. And so there is that interplay between thought and feeling. For simplicity's sake, let's say located in the mind and in the heart, respectively. And that navigating that balance correctly is the responsibility of our free will. We have to kind of say that thought is unacceptable, or responding with that feeling is inappropriate, and therefore you curtail thoughts and feelings which you would deem to be inappropriate, and to the extent to which that judgment is consistent with the Torah, then you would be living in a Torah lifestyle. You will be living in a Torah way. But it's not necessarily going to be according to the Torah. It could be according to totally different dictates, and that would cause people to respond and act in a totally different way than the Torah would suggest one should. And becomes highly personal as well, because not everybody understands the Torah the same way. We all have our own take on even the Torah. Even though the Torah is absolute, we are not. And therefore we all have our own individual takes on what it would seem to us God would want us to do or think or feel or react or say in any given situation. We have to try our best to do what it seems to us to be the Ras and Hashem. But all of this is happening all of the time. Imagine how much energy that takes. tremendous amount of energy.
Yeah, people don't sleep sometimes, it's like,
Yeah, right.
You just need a pill or something.
Yeah,
Exactly,
yeah. Yeah, exactly. People don't sleep because of these things, You're right. That's a perfect example. It can happen sometimes. You're just up in the middle of the night, and then you really feel those cogs. And then you feel the machinery. Everything's silent and just banging inside. Boom, bang, 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 boom, bang, 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 bang. It's so quiet. And there's so much noise. Yeah? It's, it's a certain time. You have certain type of people, they're just, simple, straightforward. What? Easygoing. I don't know. Yeah. Sometimes, my wife is more like that. So she doesn't, just take it easy.
Who's running the show?
Yeah. What's the big deal? What difference does it make? It's like, Ezra Kenegda. I was like, yeah. But don't you understand? If that doesn't happen, this, if that doesn't happen that, you have to have the kids, and then it is that, the other, So I'm maybe, exaggerating both sides of the coin, but for the purpose of the discussion, there are advantages to each approach, and there are disadvantages to each approach, and I suppose the person has to try and find the proper balance. The person has to probably, person has to try and find the proper balance between the two. But I definitely kind of connect to this analogy about the mill running effortlessly. I mean, of course, there's a lot of effort involved and a lot of energy expended, but the point is, it happens very subtly. So, הנשמה דורשת וחוקרת ומסבננת בכל המעשים, והלב משוטט בחוכמה לרחוק, וצופה בירוסו עניינים רבים, ברגע קטן מחשב הנה והנה. In a small moment, the mind and the heart, the soul, flutters between different thoughts, back and forth, going forward, running forward and back. So God gave wisdom, and God imparted wisdom, intelligence, enlightenment to a person, and with this he remembers many things and all the things that pass, and also foresees things that will happen. Then we mentioned that analogy here in the fourth line of the millstone. Ubezos ahochma oisei tzvaos, and with this wisdom he makes armies. Umamid hayolim umezarazam, and he raises soldiers and he encourages them. Umatzliach b'amilchosoi, and he is successful in the running of his kingdom. Umanhig b'memshalto v'toifes amo, he rules his people and is a sovereign. He rules his kingdom and is a sovereign over his people. Ubazoisa chochma poires reshotois. The imke metzulos yomim unaharos. I'm not sure if he's speaking here allegorically or actually literally. He continues by saying, he also spreads nets over the depths of the sea and of the oceans, letzud tzeid dogim, to trap fish, me'imke tahomos, from the depths. With this intelligence, yotzud chayos midbarios uva yilkoid oifois me'oifefim. He can also use this intelligence to catch wild animals in the deserts or flying birds overhead. And with his wisdom he can know and comprehend the sicknesses of the bodies and their remedies. He can also understand, discern the advantages of different types of medications and their possible harms. He can understand different types of roots and plants and fruit. Cold and hot. Moist and dry. And he also knows how to administer remedies to his body, to make a person healthy and strong. So he doesn't seem to be talking figuratively, but actually literally, that this great wisdom that God imparted to us can be used not only for the type of introspective self-improvement that we were talking about before, because that interaction and dynamic between the thoughts and the feelings that we're talking about are really about self-improvement, improving one's condition. It could be used to improve one's material condition or one's emotional and intellectual condition, but the same intelligence is also used to exert its influence on the environment for his betterment as well. And that's what he's talking about here. Okay, I guess we're going to have to stop here. But all this intelligence is coming, he says, from the neshama. That's quite a great thing then. Right? He's saying that the neshama is responsible for enabling us to procure all of the things that we need.